Hey, I'm Ben from People Nerds. One of the most widely used research tools is the survey. They inform everything from early stage exploratory work to NPS scores that pressure test our customers' experience. That ubiquity can sometimes lead to an overestimation of just how easy it is to program one. If we're not careful, our participants can have a poor experience, we get diluted or even misleading data. Today, I'm joined by Nikki Anderson, who's going to spotlight 3 common survey mistakes and how you can avoid them in order to create a clear or impactful survey for your participants and better data for your stakeholders. Let's check it out. So in this episode, we're talking survey questions, and there's a lot of different ways, certainly, that you can program your surveys. Many user experience researchers are mixed methods, so you might be programming open-end, closed-end. Nikki has I've forced her to whittle it down to 3. She has many, many more, and we'll drop some resources below of other places that she's written about surveys, design, practice, administration, certainly analyze them. But let's start with the double-barreled question, Nikki. What is this, and why is it not so great to ask your participants?
Yeah, so there are a lot of ways that you can mess up surveys. And that is because surveys are the one research method, or one of the research methods where you only get one shot. It's like M&M. You only got one shot and you can mess it up.
And as a Detroiter, I appreciate that reference a lot.
So you can't explain, as you might in a qualitative interview, oh, actually, this is what I meant. There's no take backsies. There's no kind of helping the person understand what you actually meant by the question. So surveys are a great place where we can easily mess up questions. I will raise my hand and say twice, I've done it so many times. I've sent out the most horrible surveys. But some things that you can keep in mind are double-barreled questions are one of the worst things that you can put into surveys. So has anybody ever asked you 2 questions at once? You lose track of the other question, and you kind of forget, what was that? What was the first question? People are confused. They're like, I don't know how to answer these 2 questions together. That is a double-barreled question. It means asking 2 questions at the same time. And so the reason that we do this is it can happen a lot during like regular conversations, actually, is we ask people like 2 questions at once all the time. So we say, how are you and what are you doing today? So there's 2 questions right there. Or, can you do the dishes and can you take out the trash? These come up, double-barreled questions come up a lot in natural conversation. And so they also, of course, come up in a survey when we're asking people questions. It can be because we're trying to limit the amount of questions that are in the survey, because we have this like scary thought is if there's so many questions, people aren't going to answer it, but we're still trying to get the same amount of data without asking all the questions that we have to ask. I'm super guilty of doing this. But the problem actually rises in the responses. So when we write a double-barreled question, we're asking 2 questions at once, but we're kind of like only giving people one response to it. So if I ask you, Ben, should our cell phones be faster and bigger? Yes or no?
I want them faster. I want them faster and smaller. Yeah, I'm okay with them being faster. I'm like, I don't want to have to carry around a tablet and hold it to my ear. So I guess I'd say, yeah, it wouldn't be. I want like a hip belt like my dad carries, but it's like a 10-inch. Yeah. So you've there in that example, you've asked me about the speed of a device as well as the physical characteristics of the device. And for me, I'm more interested in the physical characteristics, but you might be more interested in the components that make it faster.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so when we ask people to like agree or disagree with those statements, we don't give them any opportunity to say what you just said. Oh, faster, but Zoolander, not faster and bigger. So we force responses from participants that aren't necessarily true. So our data then becomes so much less reliable and so much less valid because we're forcing participants to then agree or disagree with a statement that they just can't agree or disagree with. And so the amazing way to get around this is by breaking up the questions. It sounds simple, but anytime you have an and in your question, break them apart. So I see a lot of, how would you rate our customer support and our product? You could have a great customer support and a really bad product. You could have a great product and a really bad customer support. Both could be neutral. We aren't going to get anything by asking those questions together or by asking any questions together. So anytime you have that and, just split them apart. How would you rate our customer service? And then separately, how would you rate our product? So when you have this happening and you're actually separating the two thoughts from each other, you're giving people the proper opportunity to respond in a truthful way that is valid and then reliable. And then I would also say, having like one extra question, so splitting up your double-barreled question, is not going to make response rates plummet. So you're not going to lose all your survey respondents because you broke up that one double-barreled question. And actually, I would say having a double-barreled question in your survey is actually more detrimental than having fewer response rates. So really making sure that you're breaking those up into two separate questions and avoiding any sort of double-barreled questions in your surveys.
All right. We talked about double-barreled questions, where the multiple parts in a single question, break them up, help the participant as well as yourself in analysis. Nikki, talk to me about absolutes. How do those creep into survey questions, and how should we make use of them?
Yeah. So I will turn around right to you, Ben, again. Do you always eat breakfast? Yes or no?
Do I always eat breakfast? Well, today, actually, you and I are recording sort of in the midday morning here in Chicago. I did not eat breakfast because I was a little nervous. I was getting my hair cut. I wanted to make sure I was prepped and ready to go. So I did not eat breakfast. I sort of got up and got about my day. But so I would say, no, I do not always eat breakfast. I also conceptually want to know what breakfast means. Like, is it any meal before noon? Anyway, so short answer, no, I do not always eat breakfast.
Okay, great. But there was a lot going on there that we could have never gotten from a survey. So sitting down and thinking, because I'm actually not a breakfast person, but technically speaking, I will sometimes eat lunch at 11:30 because I'm hungry. Is that breakfast?
Is that breakfast?
It could be breakfast because it's breaking my fast from the night before.
Right. Yes.
So, or is breakfast eggs? Does it have to be eggs? Like, if I eat a bag of chips at 10 a.m., is that breakfast? Because I've done that before. Is a mimosa breakfast?
Gosh, I hope so. I really hope so. Yeah. So I know in some of the you and I have social science backgrounds, we talk about operationalization, where we're going to break down the concept. So that's one way I think we can combat this, is put like definitions on breakfast. You talk about time frames, which is something I'm always really interested in, the operation of time. How does time help us make an absolute easier for a participant to respond to?
Yeah, of course. So when we use something like absolutes and we kind of put yes or no's on them, like, do you always do this? We can't actually use those answers because of what just happened. There are so many questions that person is probably asking themselves that we have no idea about, that would then make that data, again, we just keep on going back to this, unreliable and invalid. So we can't actually say, if everybody says that they always eat breakfast, we don't know if that's the case, because we don't know what breakfast is. As you said, we don't know if what the timing is, and the thing is like, do you always eat breakfast? I mean, yes, for the most part, except for when I'm nervous, But
I'm shrugging. Yeah. Like I can't circle yes and then put in parentheses, but I'm shrugging as I do this. Yeah. It's that you lack the nuance. You're not helping the participants. And the golden rule is make the question easy for the participants to respond to. Even if the question is complex or deals with something that they might have to think on, make it such that it's easy for them, it's possible for them to respond. And I think the smart thing that you're pointing out with an absolute like is that there's no gray space, and humans are gray, in between flexible humans.
Exactly. And that's why, as you said, timeframes are so great. So instead of using these absolutes, like, do you always eat dinner? You can ask something like, how often do you usually eat dinner in a week? Is it 0 days a week? Is it 1 to 2 times a week? Is it 3 to 4, 5 to 6, 7 days? So with that, not only are you giving the participant much more flexibility when you're offering them that answer so that they can answer truthfully, you're also taking away the absolute and replacing it with something like usually, which is gray. So the person can know, okay, I'm thinking about a standard week, not one where I'm traveling, not one where I'm running around busy, not one where there's nothing going on. So yes, I'm eating dinner every single day, like where we're in lockdown and, I have nothing else to do but eat. So like what happens is with that time frame, not only do you get less ambiguity and more clear answers, but you make it easier for the participant to respond in a way that is valid, reliable, and truthful for them. So really using those time frames and taking away those absolutes can help you create surveys that are more enjoyable to take for people and getting you data where you're not pulling your hair out trying to interpret the results.
The first two had to do more with the question stem, how we're writing it. Your third one is about the response options we are giving to folks. And we hinted to it a little bit. So walk us through the importance of giving the right or considering the response options that you provide to participants when programming surveys.
Yeah. So there are a number of times where, since I'm a researcher, I fall into the trap of always wanting to help people with research. So it's like, take our survey. I'm like, oh God, I have to, because I've been there. I know your pain. So I'll click on this survey and it will actually be something that's applicable for me. Like the other day, so I'm a writer, like fiction writer as well. And I was taking a survey about a writing program. And I was looking at the responses and I was like, none of these apply to me. And there was not a none of these apply to me option. There was no other option. And it was required. And I just wanted to say, okay, please, give me the email of the person who is trying to force people to do this, because either they're not going to get any responses or they're going to get really bad data. So not giving and not considering the responses that you're giving to people in surveys can really just impact your data and your response rate. Because if you have required questions that people can't answer, not only may they potentially answer them untruthfully, they might just not answer your survey. And this can happen in a few different scenarios. The first one that I see this happen really commonly in is that people don't know what responses to put because they haven't done research on what the responses should be. So, if you're a writing program and you're looking into kind of understand why writers struggle with writing, you can hypothesize of some different reasons why, but you might not be putting all of the most considerate or the most applicable responses into your survey, leaving people like me who are like, none of these things apply to me. But let's also take if you're at a fitness app, let's say we're working for a fitness app and we're asking people, how do you track your goals? And you give a load of responses. But what if your responses don't include pen and paper and I track my goals with pen and paper? What if I don't track my goals? what if I track my goals by having conversations with friends and family? Like, there are just so many scenarios that make it impossible for you to come up with like every perfect response, especially if you have not tried to understand what the people are actually thinking about when they're responding to this survey. So the first thing that I would really highly recommend is to do your research before you're doing the survey. And this doesn't mean that you have to go and do a whole qualitative research study. Look into previous research that's been done, do desk research, do market research, talk to customer support, talk to account management, talk to sales, product marketing, everybody, and try and like form some of these answers that would make sense. And again, pilot. That is very important. Stick to Likert scales. So Likert scales are generally either from 1 to 7 or 1 to 5, and they have anchor points at either side of extremes. So very commonly, I agree all the way to I disagree, or strongly agree all the way to strongly disagree. So that is very helpful as well, because it also gives people the opportunity to like opt out of things or be neutral about things. And then finally, like put an other section, or it does not apply, not applicable, other with an open text field. All of these things can really help you, especially if you're still not sure what the correct responses should be for your survey. So if people can't find a response that makes sense for them, they can choose other and they can write in their response. And by kind of using these methods, you're mitigating that nightmare of interpreting data that is not really interpretable. And you're also mitigating very low response rates when people can't actually answer your required questions.
Yeah, I've been in this scenario a lot of times, and I think the mutually exclusive and exhaustive, if the question is, this is just a like another thing to consider. If the list is like 50 options outside of like an industry, I know some there's like the demographic, sociographic, like in which industry do you work, and obviously you can do a drop down, but sometimes an open end just works. I know it'll take a little bit longer when you have to program it, but as Nikki is saying with piloting can also be make it an open end and, do maybe a smaller version of the segments or the folks that you need for your other study, and then see what their responses are. But as Nikki said, optional, make the questions optional, a not applicable, and another. Those always go a long way. But yeah, I've been there, Nikki, wherein you're like, okay, do I, because categorizing them can help me with analysis. I can do some filtering, or I can tag, or I can just give some percentages on the frequencies. But am I missing any nuance? And that's why you have the other there. If there's something that might not be captured, give them an other, because you don't want people being in that scenario as you described, where they don't see something that fits them, and you want to have something that matches their experience. Are there any other last minute things as we've been talking, Nikki, something that you like to share for folks who are programming surveys? They're really, really popular. Stakeholders typically buy into them. Anything else that you can share?
So as I mentioned, piloting, as you said as well, can help with either further responses or can help make sure that your questions make sense and are sound. So piloting or testing that internally. I would also say, similar to the usability segment that we did, try not to use subjective language. So for example, instead of saying like on a scale of 1 to 7, like how helpful are we? We can kind of say overall, like, how do you feel about this? Or if that feels uncomfortable for you, we can ask, how helpful or unhelpful was this?
Yeah, we were
so
talking
just
about
making
those
sure.
Yeah, those semantic differentials. Yeah, I think just like Nikki's been saying, those anchors help your participants answer.
Yeah, they're super helpful. If you have to anchor on a certain word, putting both the words into the question is really, really great. And then I would say as well, using a mix of closed and open questions. So Ben, that was really great bringing up the open-ended questions, because they can be so helpful. They can give you additional context. You can use them as a follow-up to a closed-ended question by asking, why did you pick that? Or why did you feel that way? And go a little bit deeper, or turning a question that you really don't have responses into an open-ended question. So mixing that up. can be also more enjoyable for your participant because it's a little bit more dynamic than just going through a list of questions and clicking answers.
Absolutely. Well, Nikki, as always, it's a delight to get to spend some of the time and on surveys. Thank you so much. We'll drop resources. Nikki has written widely about surveys. Be sure to check out some of our other episodes that we have on programming, creating, and thinking through your questions. Thank you, as always, Nikki.
Thank you.